Thank you so much, Professor. And also thank you to bring me back to Colorado. Usually I was here, I believe it's 2006 or 5 for an amazing exhibition and artist talk. So it's good to be back, and especially this time I came from Chengdu, so it's amazing to see the blue sky, and so it's good to be here. So I'm just continue where Professor stopped. Yes, after I think almost 4 years in Dharamsala, then I got an opportunity to go to London to study, and so it was quite a big culture shock, because I'm sure some of you have probably been in Dharamsala. So from Dharamsala went to London, then also the school I was attending, it's called Central St. Martin, which is, and so I guess for any artists from non-European background, when you go to Europe, I think the first kind of question or the first experience you have is or West meet East, or in my case, it's East going to meet West. Then the question I have is how I'm going to meet this West. And then it didn't take that much long, because I remember first couple of months, 3 months, went really fast, and I was so hungry to see everything, not just art. I think, including the shopping mall and even the supermarket. Because I remember one of the amazing experience I had is one of the supermarket I went with my friends first time. When I went to the vegetable counter, I saw there's 5 or 6 different tomatoes for you to choose. Because in Dharamsala, I remember in 4 years, we only have one kind of tomatoes in that little vegetable market. So it was kind of really big contrast, and then very quickly, then I have this question, which is how I'm going to meet this West. And then I think, seems I have 3 options. Because during that 3 months, I also working with other artists, and also made friends and went to lots of galleries. So the 3 options I have is, I think the first one is, maybe I should just completely give up what I can't say completely give up. I think there is 3 choice for me to how to meet this West. I think one is maybe, yes, completely change my way of art practice, which is I did come across some Asian artist students, because the course I was with is an MA. So I saw some people completely doing that. Then there is also another one case, which is not border. For instance, I met some Tibetan Tanka artists. They're also from India, been in England for many years, but somehow they are quite happy what they are doing, and they are not bothered by all those modern things. And then third option was probably just stay in the middle, which is kind of intermediate. Then I think I choose the middle way. Uh, uh, it was, I think that it took me some time to make that decision, and but also later I realized I kind of picked the more tough choice. Then of course there's also maybe people. I mean, sometimes I ask why I choose that intermediate way. One thing I realized when I went to London, I'm already 30. I'm already in the mid 30. So one thing I realized, I'm a little bit too old to completely change myself. And then I think the second reason was I'm really fell in love with that Buddha figure, which is really started from before I went to India. And then in India, I had the opportunity to even know more about this figure. And somehow I kind of not quite ready to let it go. And of course, then there's also identity issue, because that time I was thinking if I completely let myself go, I might end up doing something which is a lot of other artists or even Western artists doing at that time in London. So also that's probably one of the reasons I try to also keep some kind of my identity. And then of course there is another question, which is, I mean, as a minority artist or as somebody from Tibet, do you really have to keep that identity? I think that's kind of maybe different topic, which is I'm not going to probably talk today. Anyway, so let's see. And then I think the choice I picked was tough, because the reason I think I studied my art in Beijing in the early 80s, and then those days I think China, the art as an option or as a kind of philosophy, which is quite tight, and also as a student there is no much option. And then also the school system compared nowadays, I think it was very traditional, and there is no much creativity thinking and the critics. It's mainly you learn the technique. And then also we've been told, basically we've been told this is art or this is not art. So we graduate. I mean, even when I went to London, I kind of have a concept of this is art, this is not art. And then I think the second one also, it's something to do with the Buddha figure, because in Dharamsala, I spent nearly 4 years really study hard with the Tankas. I mean, basically, I really want to figure out this Buddha figure and also know more about the actually through that study to know more about my own culture and history. And then one thing I think I really learned is how much you love that Buddha figure. that figure is kind of fixed. There is no moment, even how talented you are, if how creative you are, it seems there is no way you can really change that. Of course, also I don't really have that desire to change, because the more I learned in Dharamsala, more I fell in love with this figure. And so that's all kind of become the issue when I try to go to the middle way. And so with all those questions in my head, and with all those questions which is not got answered, and I've been living in London almost, I think, over a year. And then there is a little story which is actually is the title of today's talk. I think it was around probably 1997, sometime in spring. A friend of mine invited me to his girlfriend's, I think his girlfriend's birthday party. And then I didn't realize the party was quite big, because they have a big family house. And so I went to the party, and then my English is not still very good enough to communicate with people. So, when you go to party, you don't say much, or you can't communicate, then you end up just hanging around. So that's what I did. And then I was looking around the house, and then I think upstairs there's a very nice bathroom. That's where I find the Buddha, actually sit on the floor. It was kind of shock for me. It was, even though, I'm not a practicing Buddhist, but somehow, as a custom, as a Tibetan, somehow this concept is always in your head. The Buddha always should be above your head. So that was the experience. And then I think after that, I noticed there's more and more Buddha lying actually in the bathroom or people's garden, sometimes even in the shop. Then the more I took notice, the more I noticed actually the Buddha even more associated with fashion, and with celebrity, and also with those Western Buddhist center, because in London, the place I live, quite close to one of the Buddhist center. And I remember they even have a Shakyamuni Buddha sculpture made by one of the Buddhist sculpture, and then the face almost kind of looked very Western, and that's kind of raised an interesting question for me. Hello? Oh yeah, that's better. I can put up. What I really like, what's happened with the Buddha in the West is, I like it. I like the way Buddha came down above my eye. Then it makes Buddha much more close to the people. And also, I really like how the Westerner and also the fashion designer, the creative even the advertisement people doing advertisement people, how they not reinterpret. I think how their interpretation of the Buddha, which is really kind of eye-open for me, because somehow before that in my head, I think that, as I said before, the Buddha is Buddha. You can't change it. You can't do anything except worship. But certainly now, it's all kind of it's almost like opened up for me, and then that's a kind of big revolution for me, for my thinking and for my how to deal with the Buddha figure in my art. And then gradually, that was one of the first, I think, exercise I did in London. And this piece is called Soho Buddha, because my school, Central St. Martin, was quite close to Soho in central London. And so that those different colors is representing the nightlife in Soho. Excuse me. And then I think since then, really, I can't stop myself. Then it seems there is lots of way you can appreciate this figure and make it even more interesting. And so those are all the work I did during that time, and also dealing with the neon. Especially I picked the neon color, which is associated with strip club. I know it's being a little bit naughty, but somehow it was quite amazing experience, because before in Dharamsala or in Lhasa, when I working with the Buddha figure, I always have a very heavy heart, and also kind of very I'm not that quite enjoying doing it, but somehow I want to do it. But this time it's totally different. It's kind of just my imagination kind of really run quite freely, and so this is one of the pieces I try to design shirts, Western style shirts for the Buddha, and then those pieces also later become my part of my MA exhibition. And oh, thank you. So that's what happened. I think just it's then I started. Also, I noticed in England, I think people, when they're taking their train or subway, they like to play with, I think that one is called Sudoku, is that right? That's it. And then also they like to play with crosswords. And then even, for instance, this piece, I think I even made my own kind of crossword, try to make it maybe with some words which is something to do with Tibet or China. And so that was the experimenting time. Then later, around 2003 or 4, I discovered stickers. Then this is probably really the first piece with sticker. I think that time, especially this sticker, I think it's called a Pokemon, was very popular. So I made this piece, and it's called a Pokemon Buddha. And then later, I discovered even more stickers from Disney. So that's also called Disney. I think it's called Disney Plus. I did quite a lot of Disney Plus. That's also another Disney Plus. And then I think during that time, also what I realized is before, when I was just doing the using my own kind of way of doing Buddha, before I realized about the Buddha in a bathroom, somehow the work, I think, get especially for Western audience, especially there is no knowledge of Tibet or no knowledge of Buddhism, then I think it does make people think it's just a religious figure, and so you kind of just push people away a little bit. But what's happened with, since I used the sticker, somehow even people no knowledge about Tibet or Buddhism, they're really interested and also fell in love, because somehow I managed to kind of make it more accessible for people. So that's something kind of really amazing experience. Then I started making some interpretation of with the Buddha figure, with some Western, for instance. This is I think piece made for the do you call Valentine's Day in February, and then this is piece also associated with the soccer. I think it's called the soccer Buddha. Because I remember that sometime that year there is a big soccer game somewhere in Europe. That's another piece. Then that's also one of the first experiment with reinterpretation of the Buddha. This one is called Buddha Shakyamuni, which is the very classical and historical Buddha. But what I would try to do is make it kind of so vibrant and also so kind of accessible. Somehow we can't quite see the detail, but I do encourage you, if you are interested, try to see some of my work in detail. There is probably a couple of thousand stickers, and then later I even started using a paper card and a magazine cutout. Just try to make a kind of, not just kind of a simple collage. I try to make a kind of connection with my surrounding in London. That's also one of the things I think really made my work is kind of more accessible, I think, to people, because I really taking apart and also try to integrate into the society, which is I live in London. I mean, even though it's not easy from somewhere from outside, I think you do feel always does have a few outsider. But I mean, through then also one of the amazing things is since I went to London, my art practice has become very visual. When I say visual, means because my English. I mean, when I studied in China or Tibet, we never taught English. So I only learned English when I was in Dharamsala. Then also in Dharamsala, I didn't really go to school. I'm sure probably some of the Tibetan we know. We learned our English in the Tibetan library, front of the library. with foreign tourists and Buddhists. I remember during 4 years, probably I have dozens of English, even sometimes Japanese or Koreans, So we grab anyone can speak English, then ask them to have a conversation. So somehow, when I went to London, my reading was very poor, and my conversation is not too bad. So that really made me using my eye more than my reading, because I can't really read an English book. So that's really made me kind of go to everywhere and looking things, and so that also I think helped probably really enriched my work, because when you can't read, then you only go to look for those visual images. I mean, for instance, if I come across magazine, I can't quite read the whole article, but I will really try to get copy or cut out those images. So that really kind of enriched the whole collage piece. And this is also another work which is I'm kind of trying to reinterpret the Tibetan philosophy. So this is a piece I think called it's called I think it's called probably Shambhala in the modern time. Then also, I mean, the sculpture is much later, but I think it's part of the kind of reinterpretation of tradition thinking, and so yeah. Later, I also started with the sculptures. Then, one thing, I mean, as I said before, somehow. How much I play with this Buddha figure, but somehow, until now, I never had any desire to change the shape. So when I do my work with Buddha, I still really strictly follow this measurement, and then it's sometimes also you can see the measurement on the paper. Then I think after play and with those figures, then gradually I also starting experiment with some how do you call it, kind of common, make a common, or try to express some of my my thinking through the Buddha figure, and then I started. Those were one of the first piece I started using Chinese, and then the whole Buddha is actually built up by Chinese character. Then the Chinese is I think I quote from one of the Mao's Red Book, which is I'm so familiar with, because when I was in Tibet. We have to have one. I mean, everybody has one, and even when I go to school, I have to carry one. And then I think this, especially the piece, I think that the quote from Mao, I think he was talking about the minority issue, I guess. Yeah. Then that's also a similar piece, but this one I think I call the Trinity. Then there is a 3 Buddha figure. Then each one it's built up by different languages. Actually, one English, one Tibetan, one Chinese, and then I quote those. I pick those quote quite carefully. So. if someone can read English, of course you can. If someone can read Tibetan or Chinese, you will know there is something that's I'm kind of interested in, also try to express. And that's also a similar piece, which is the yub, which is the middle one. It's a Tibetan, and the surround is Chinese. The Chinese is also quote from Mao's Red Book. I think one of those is also talking about Tibet issue. So I think even the piece maybe is called Tibet issue, but it was a long time ago. I almost forgot the title. And then also sometimes you can make quite a nice little piece of Buddha standing with rose flowers. But I don't remember that quote. I think it's in Chinese. So I did, yes, quite a lot of work with Chinese, Tibetan, and English characters, because that's something I was. It's something I was around there, because in London, I mean, everyone is speaking English. Then of course I have friends I can speak Tibetan. Even though I don't have many Chinese friends, but I think my reading still mainly is a Chinese book. So that's also, I'm also kind of trying to show that's what I am, even though I'm Tibetan, but somehow I've been educated in China, and so sometimes, I mean, I even feel I'm kind of half Chinese. Then I came to London. Then also I enjoyed English lifestyle, and I then also start gradually try to become one of the, I can't say English, maybe British. And so later people, actually even my wife said, telling me I'm like a banana. So that's what I am, you know, all those three together. And then this is also one of the pieces. I think it's have a connection with the Tibetan issue, because I remember during that time, I think it was 2006 or 5. There is I think in the Tibetan community, even in Dharamsala, there is a big debate about middle way and how try to connect with the Chinese and maybe find a way being together. And then that was kind of my thinking of if one day the Tibetan and Chinese have a good dialogue, and then if they decide to beside each other, then I sort of then what's the national flag would it look like? And so I don't know, you can see, so the middle one was holding one of the kind of my vision of national flag for Tibet. Then also, I mean, the three Buddha, but here it's not a Buddha. I think it's representing three different views from the Tibetan community. One is supporting the middle way, one is not supporting. Then there is one group, even maybe poor Chinese. And yeah, unfortunately, the resolution is too light and you can't really see. But this is a piece I think I made for the Venice Biennale in '99. Then it was one of the big ones I did that time. It was about 6 meters long, 10 panels, or 9 meters actually. And then the whole piece is actually it's a reclining Buddha. I don't know, can you see the little shape? And then I was using the stock market indicate to indicate the relationship between the Chinese and Tibet since 1954 until I think it was 2008. Yeah, that's right. It's 2008 because there's a huge things happened just before the Olympics, and then somehow the Tibetan and the Chinese relationship really went down so deep. So that was the kind of indication. But I mean, there is no scientific to back up this indication. It was just kind of my. It was just my read, and then this is just one of the panel. I was hoping you can see more detail, but it's still not. And so that's another piece, and also using a Buddha. Then this is kind of amazing thing, because I remember in Dharamsala when I was studying Tanka with those young Tanka painter. I mean, they are in their early 20s and full of energy, but then suddenly they have to really sit there for hours, try to build this perfect shape. Then I remember frequently you can really hear they are really frustrated because they really want to stretch themselves with the Buddha, but somehow they can't do anything. So I remember only the space they can really stretch, which is the background, the landscapes. So they can really feel free to do this thing of the kind of vision. But with the Buddha, somehow they can't do anything. But then I was kind of, when I was doing those pieces, I was kind of, laughing myself, say, gosh, somehow I did make the Buddha do what I really want to do without changing the shape. So that's what happened with those pieces. So for instance, the couple of the one before and even this one, I can really talk about something I'm kind of interested and concerned. Then this is also one of the pieces called Panda Politics, because I read an article say the Chinese government is going to give two panda to Japanese, not Japanese, to Taiwanese, and then the Taiwanese get so excited they made a huge preparation, but just when it's going to be handed over to them, then they realize there is some politics inside, because the Chinese government just want to give a panda without any document, but somehow since there's international law, if there's animal come cross board, you have to have a kind of paper. But without a paper, then it means, if I accept this panda, then it means I accept Taiwan as a part of the province. So I was kind of amazed by this kind of, the politics using animal. And so this is piece, I think, it's reflecting on that. Then what I did is I wrote all the article on the background of that piece in Chinese. Then this is also one of the pieces I think I did. It was during the London Olympic that summer. Then it's called the Summer Buddha. Because I remember that summer in London, there are so many things happen. One thing, they get so excited, they got the Olympics, and then in the summer there is a London bombing, and so there is lots of tragedy and also lots of exciting things. So during that time, it's a big piece. It took me a couple of months to make. Then during making that piece, the outside, the things changing, because when I work, I always like to put a BBC radio, and so you can really see, kind of hear what's happening outside. So if you have an opportunity, can look at this piece, I mean, you can see lots of information can tell you what that was, what is that summer happened in London, and this is another piece I did for I think it was '98 in art in Dubai, and then this is Buddha is try to talk about the environmental issue. Because that also became a very big topic in the West that time. Because before I went to Dubai, I've been told in Dubai you can buy car, even luxury car, quite cheaply. So every family actually owned quite a lot of cars, and then the oil was so cheap there. And so that was kind of the reference. Imagine in Dubai, I mean, everyone driving couple of cars, so what the pollution will be. So that was also the piece, I think, reference to that. Then that was not that long ago. I think probably about 2-3 years ago. Then I think the work's quite big, and there is quite a few of them. This is just one of them, and also I think I changed my practice. Before I mainly work on a paper, but this time we started using kind of different material, like resin and also dye bone. Then also I started using some paint, and still is the Buddha, and then I'm sure the flame is also a reference to what's happening in Tibet. Yeah, that's another similar piece. I think, unfortunately, we can't see the detail. There is amazing detail, except the stickers, and then there is lots of collage. I think it's called. I think the title is called Power Lama. And then this is also actually the piece I think finished last year. It has for the museum in upstate New York, and also we can't really see the detail. I think basically there is lots of reference to what's happening last 2 years, with the terrorists, with the what I mean, because when I'm doing those work, I live in New York, and so I kind of really felt the Americans are really struggle, especially the middle class, and also struggle, frustrated with your politicians. So I think there's lots of those references in this work. And this is something, a very little piece, actually, I made for my friends in Hong Kong. She lives in Hong Kong. And then what I really like the piece is, I like the little umbrella there. Then I think it's a reference to what's happening it's not last year or the year before in Hong Kong. I think they call it the umbrella revolution. That's the same, I think, in my work, even though I'm still interested in what's happening in Tibet, what's happening in the world. I'm really interested in politics. But somehow, I think I'm trying to put those thinking into work more kind of playful way, and also not too kind of punchy, because that's something I'm kind of so familiar with. As a professor introduced before, I mean, I grew up that kind of environment during the 70s and the 80s. I mean, in China, the propaganda and the politic art, actually, sometimes it's part of my, become a part of my knowledge. So, since then, when I'm trying to express my view and those issues, I'm trying to be kind of very settle, or some people say settle, and but I just want to pick something can point that thing. So that's why I like this little umbrella. I think it's the little monkey was holding in Buddha's hand. So I think that's probably really I want to say today. And I mean, basically, my practice covered more different other mediums and subject, but I think because the Buddha subject is the main kind of my main something I want to talk to you, and also to tell you how I kind of managed to work with this image, and still quite happy and not frustrated, and also doesn't feel heavy. And this is something kind of medium. I think I will probably still keep working. So I think that's really much, and thank you so much for your attention. And thank you.